reality bends.
Take this. Stand still.
I require aid!
Hello and welcome, Exiles, to look at my Animate Blade Necromancer, a character that can take a summoning build into the stratosphere of tank, of course using the most abusable item of the year, which is still Ephemeral Edge and or Energy Blade. When I started this character, I actually was using Energy Blade, but if I want to push towards doing voided content, Ephemeral Edge is just tankier. Ultimately, it's kind of a choice of, do you want to have more tank or do you want to have more damage? Just to look at what Energy Blade does is right now you have 15% of 50k, which is like what? 7,500 base top end damage. Whereas if I were to click an Energy Blade, now I'm just going to take out some supports of the Animate weapon or Animate Guardian here to showcase the difference. The energy shield would go to 30,000, but the base damage is 600 to 12k. And the attack speed is like 30% faster. The difference in Ephemeral Edge versus Energy Blade is roughly, I would think, around 2 times the damage. So you have your choices when you want to go Energy Blade versus when you don't want to go it, dependent on, do I want to have double the damage or do I want to have like double the tank? That's usually just the trade-off. There isn't a break point where you use one or the other. For me personally, if I'm going to do voided content, I'd rather have the 50,000 ES. I'd rather be a bit more on the tank side, but I figured I'd cover that just to showcase the difference. Now, I'll give you here a showcase of what the gameplay looks like in doing something like an Uber Elder. This is the Uber version of it. And it's pretty chill. I would say this character has kind of 10 out of 10 chill factor in terms of like what I have to do. I want to say pretty much autoplay and not care too much. Like right now they're getting obviously extra shape respawns, and for a bit there I didn't have Leech, so he was chipping me down over time. But when your minions are attacking, they are leeching to you, which gives you a very high sustain on your ES pool, which makes for a summoner that has incredibly good sustain. Late game of this character, you could go recover on block as well if you wanted. So even while the minions weren't able to leech because they're in the immunity phase, you would still get sustain from it, which would be pretty dang cool. The concept is, I think, as far as builds I've played this league, this is a real big winner. I'm enjoying this character quite a lot, is the way I would put it, in terms of playstyle, and also just, it does one of the things I like to do in this game very well, which is make the ES number go big. I want to also address, a lot of people always ask me, Lance, why do you play ES builds over life builds? And maybe I'll make a separate video on this topic at some point, but I gotta be honest, I don't think it's very balanced. I think life builds are just way worse than ES builds. So why would I spend 100D or whatever I'm gonna spend on a character to have a third of the max hit? It just doesn't really make sense to me to just make an arbitrarily weaker character just to choose life. So I don't want to go out of my way to do that per se. And you'll see, like, we're getting degen now while they're in their ad phases. But the second there's mobs to attack, we are leeching and we are sustaining. Now, I'm gonna go over the various building blocks of this character after we finish this fight, but I want to take note of a very I think it's a pretty cool use of a mercenary, which is part of the reason we can have actually such high ES with a discipline aura from our merc while also saving us a lot of reservation space. And I think it's worked out pretty cool. Okay, I need to retarget our minions so they're actually attacking Shaper, because right now that's what they're waiting on. Sometimes, you know, they don't realize Elder's in an immunity phase and they're still just attacking Elder rather than the actual boss that needs to be killed to finish the fight. So occasionally you have to do some level of repositioning there, but for the most part, it's pretty brain off. They just work. Every time I summon one of these guys, they have like a 30-second duration. So there's not too much you need to do on your end in terms of like maintenance. I also have the Bone Offering on a cast and damage taken and desecrate, so I'm not even self-casting those. I want to have this as chill as it can possibly be, was the goal. All right, now let's get into the building blocks of the character. We are a Necromancer for a big reason, which is Bone Barrier. Bone Barrier makes the minions damage leech to you is life, which is actually very consistent sustain. And as far as I know, it works with instant leech. I might test it with instant leech later when I'm thinking about voided content to have that more consistent sustain. But for right now, I'm just enjoying Bone Barrier plus Ghost Reaver and just crazy good ES per second from the minions leeching. Another reason for Necromancer is the Mistress of Sacrifice. This in combination with Vile Bastion, we're stealing the Vile Bastion node from the Occultist, gives us the stun immunity as well as a good defensive layer of block. You'll notice in our hideout, we're 53,000 ES, whereas when we're in the combat of that fight, we were at 52,000. Now there's two things happening here. Number one is when we're actually fighting enemies, they're going to be proccing us to take damage, thus doing Bone Barrier, thus proccing our block chance going to 75 and like 50 something, I think roughly. We have about an 80% effective Bone Barrier, or Bone Offering, I mean, that gives quite a bit of block, and that block is giving us ES from the Necromancer. And the other big part where we're getting ES is actually from our Mercenary. This is, I think, is a really neat way to use a Mercenary, is you can jack up the Mercenary's aura effect. Level 84 Mercenaries, as far as I've been told from people who've been testing the numbers, seem to be giving roughly around level 27 auras. So this one I spent multiple days finding. Frost Hand, I was trying to look for one with Purity of Ice and Discipline. You'll notice my character's res is actually pretty bricked for cold res, and part of that is capped around this Mercenary having Purity of Ice. Now granted, you could force in some more cold res on your gear and just get a single Discipline aura Merc, and that would work. I grinded real hard to get the double aura. I wouldn't particularly recommend it. It was like a 3-day grind of doing Abomination rushing the entire time, so you can make that mind up yourself. But the way we're using and abusing this aura is we're actually grabbing a lot of items that have Discipline aura effect. The fun thing is I can have a character that has literally like no aura investment whatsoever on my tree. And because of these mercs having so many gear slots, you can actually scale a very efficient discipline. I have 60 Discipline aura effect here, 20 on my ring, that takes us to 80. I have 10 on my shield, that takes us to 90. I have 19 on the corruption, which takes us to like 109. I have 14% from the enchant here, Enchanting Influence, which takes us to 123 aura effect. And then I have 15 on my helmet, which takes us to like 138 aura effect. So what ends up happening is we have a discipline that's a level 28 discipline or 27 discipline. So it's like 280 flat ES or something. And then we have over 130 aura effect. So this Merc alone is giving us 600 flat ES, which is why in hideout I have 43,000 ES. But when I go to an actual zone, I go all the way up to 50,000 the second I have that aura on me. Now, these auras are very, very consistent in my opinion, but the main thing you need to guarantee uptime on this is you need to make sure your Mercenary is going to survive. And I have done this in a few ways for building the tank on my Mercenary. Number one is when we're in a zone, since the Mercenary has such an efficient Discipline aura, the Mercenary itself has actually quite a lot of ES and quite a lot of life based on the Discipline aura and based on using the Dark Seer. The Dark Seer gives a bunch of life and ES, and on top of that, allows them to inflict malediction. Now, this is nice, having a base raw HP pool, but how do we support that for survivability without a Defiance of Destiny? Because I want to run Perkle's Toe for the nice 30% more damage. So how do we support that level of HP? Well, we're going to do a double recover on block shield. I made this through recombinators where I would use non-natives. So for example, I would recombinate, or I would awaken our Orb of Shield with aura effect and either ES recover or life recover, where I'd get those as two isolated suffixes. And then I would get another shield. For example, I think I have some examples in my stash just to showcase what this looks like. So in my stash, if I go to, I have them somewhere, I put them away. Okay, let's see if I have a shield example here. This is a good example. So this shield you'll see has recover, has suppress, and has dexterity. Now the important thing is the shield base I was recombinating for was a transfer attuned. It was this shield base. Transfer attuned is a pure ES based shield, which means if I recombinate that with this shield and it picks the transfer attuned base, dexterity and suppression are mods that cannot naturally occur on the transfer attuned, which means they cannot transfer, but it counts towards the total mod pool for the recombination. So there's 3 mods here, and then 2 mods on the shield, which would have been the other recover mod and the aura effect, which means if it picks transfer attuned, it has a 57% chance at that point to give me a 3 mod back, and it can only give me the 3 mods I care about. roughly when you do a recombination like this, it's about a 28% to succeed. I took 4 shields to hit or 5 shields to hit, so I was just a little bit below average or right on the average to hit. And then after that, I did some prefix crafting to give some block chance, thus to proc the recover on block. The other thing we're doing, and probably the more broken thing and the thing that's going to guarantee your mercenary survival, is these gloves right here, Soul Ascension. Somebody found this out, I don't know who, but they told me about it on stream. Apparently Soul Ascension, the Soul Eater stacks actually are giving the Mercenary the damage reduction from Soul Eater. Normally Soul Eater caps at 45, and from what I understand, rare monsters normally get 2 DR for every Soul Eater stack. If you give a Mercenary these gloves with +5 stacks, that means they can go to 50 stacks, which then takes them to 100 DR, which means they can be effectively damage immune. So if I want to take this character to avoid Valdos eventually, which is what I want to do, then they can build up to Soul Eater stacks and become effectively immortal, and they will not die. So that's the fun little way we're going to try to keep the Mercenary survival. Of course, we are using Prototype as well. You'll notice we have 194 negative res on this. When we're in zone, it actually goes to 164 because we have +30 from Necromancer. So I need to upgrade the ring a little bit to get more effective minus res. And don't worry, one of the fun facts about this Merc having a Purity of Ice aura is although the aura, the reservation or the res looks pretty iffy on cold and fire, it's actually not. We'll go again to the zone to showcase this. When we're in zone, they do have cap fire res because I'm running Purity of Fire as well as I'm giving them res from my Necromancer. And they have cap cold res because they're running Purity of Ice and they're giving themselves a lot of cold res. So that's what's going on there for their resistances. Another thing we're doing is we're also going for shock immunity with the boots and freeze immunity so they don't get stuck somewhere. And the shock immunity is a combination of the Eldritch Implicit on their boots, as well as the Abyssal Socket. The Abyssal Jewel has Corrupted Blood and enough Shock Avoid to cap to 100% Shock Avoid, because that's one of the more dangerous things when they're wearing Adorianis. Now, another thing I want to note here is you'll notice I have an AG. And one thing I want to talk about is AG or no AG, Dark Monarch versus Rare Helmet. I started this character off with a Dark Monarch with the double Animate weapon. Personally, I think on any level of budget, and if I was never thinking about doing void maps, I would probably just use this entirely because number one, you get twice the amount of blades. It's more cool, 14 blades instead of 7 blades going around slicing things up. The big reason I swapped off this helmet is purely to push tank for doing void maps, which is not something I would personally recommend unless you're trying to push the void maps. The tank on this character is already insane. Changing out this helmet does not make the difference on whether or not you're going to be tanky for pretty much everything in terms of normal content. So I would recommend using this if you want to just do normal content. But if you want to push for Void Valdos, which is I'm going to try to take a Summoner build into Void Valdos, then that's where the AG and the current setup we have comes in. So why are we using an AG? Well, the AG is for basically 2 big items. It is the 10 Fortify from Kingmaker, which is DR, it's more tank, as well as it gives crit multi and cull, which is just a bit more damage for my Animate weapon blades. Now, they do not have particularly good crit chance, so that crit multi is only pseudo usable. It does help, it's something that it aids them, but it's not like making them deal all that much more damage. It's mainly for the 10 Fortify, which is why I wanted to justify it. The other reason is you'll notice Garb of the Ephemeral, which helps you deal with all the random action speed mods like Petrify Tattoos, like the action speed slows in Citadel or action speed slows in Fortress, or you get reduced action speed per action you've done recently, map mod in T17s and 16.5s. And then also it negates crits for all enemies nearby. So it's a nice additional layer of defense. Then on top of that, what I am trying, I don't know if it works, I haven't tested it, but we're trying Soul Ascension gloves on the AG as well, in case the Soul Eater stacks does apply DR. I haven't gotten to test the tank of this AG yet, but that is something we're going to move to do. Ultimately, with Necromancer, one of the other big benefits, the 40% gain life is extra, makes a huge deal when you have a AG that has 100,000 life, and that means they have about 40,000 ES, which means they're regenerating about 80k per second. So he should be fairly tanky we'll see. I'm going to test them out in some hard content. And one of the other things I have on the AG as well is I have Brittle Ground when near I think I have it for near unique or near pinnacle. For whatever reason, the items that have the affixes about near unique or near pinnacle, they just work. Either we as the player are considered a pinnacle or the merc considers itself a pinnacle. I don't know exactly, but those affixes or implicits are working. So that Brittle Ground I think has like a 6 seconds, and you can see him putting it down even though we're not near a unique enemy. And that's on those boots there. So we're capping their res for chaos, giving him Mask of the Stitch Demon for regen, and then the Kingmaker for fortify and Coal and a bit of crit multi. So that's the supporting cast of the Mercenary in the AG. As for the rest of the character, the big, basically, I guess, bare bones, or not bare bones, like the skeleton, the thing that supports or the thing that makes it all work in a build like this is the clusters. Without the clusters, this character just doesn't really exist, because clusters give us 4 different scalars that multiply with each other, and it's readily available versus it not being super accessible throughout the tree, which is flat ES, which helps the base damage, int, which scales percent ES, which is a multiplier on that flat ES, attack speed, which is how fast the minions attack, which also we run spiritual command, which means we have a really fast attack shield or shield charge attack time, which feels very good, and then percent damage. So these clusters are where you get all your attack speed, they're where you get all your percent damage scaling, and then they're also where you scale your ES bigly. So basically, clusters is the name of the game, and we're trying to get as many as we can. I went with a 4 cluster setup here. I also was running a 3 cluster setup earlier, which was maybe a 3 cluster might be preferable. I'm not sure if stretching for this 4th cluster is worth it or not yet. I need to workshop that a little bit myself. Now, one thing I want to say here that I should have covered earlier is I am planning to probably do a budget version of this build. This character right now is not affordable at all. We're doing super min-max gear because I'm trying to push for Void Valdos. And that being said, is I think this character could work pretty well on a reasonable budget. And I think people appreciated it last time when I made a budget version of the Frost cast on crit character. So I might try to do this with this build as well, because I think this character is really a 10 out of 10 in terms of playstyle, in terms of like build feel. I've been enjoying it quite a bit myself. So I'd like to share it with a more affordable approach than what I obviously have here, which is way more invested into just trying to push the absolute numbers to the moon. Editor Lance cutting in the video because I forgot to go over the gearing on the character. So as for crafting the gear, and just a big baseline thing I'm going to say right out of the gate, do not attempt to go for Elder and Hunter and all these extra influences unless you have a good bound or can afford a good bound. Otherwise, it just adds a hell of a lot of cost to the character, and I don't recommend it. For example, Dark Monarch, if I wasn't pushing Void Valdomaps, I would just recommend this. No AG. It's a decent amount. I think it's a decent amount better damage, and it's way cheaper. And so that's one of the things where you'd swap this out. You wouldn't be using the 6 mod, Elder mod, and bound. So just keep that in mind when I'm talking about a lot of these gear pieces in general. The thing you can subtract out of the equation is adding the influences. They're only to enable bound. If you don't have by bound, you don't need it, and they just make it more expensive to craft. All right, now let's go into the gear pieces besides that. So if you do want to do a rare helmet, the way you make a helmet like this is you add Remembrance Orbs strands. So you have some strands on there. Then you use the crafting bench and you use the re-roll rarity mod as a way to make it go from scoured to rare. This is a way you can make it rare without losing any strands. And then, well, technically make it magic first, make an imprint, then make it rare. And what you're going to be doing is a fossil combination of hollow fossil, fundamental, and sanctified. You can also add something like corroded if you want to remove elemental res rolls from occurring to try to increase the odds a bit. Hollow fossils are pretty expensive, so it might be worth it. And the whole idea here is you're trying to hit percent int with flat int with abyssal socket. And the reason you have the strands is, let's say you hit T2% intelligence with T1% intelligence and T2 flat int. You can attempt to use strands to upgrade that T2 to T1. Obviously on this helmet, we did not successfully upgrade it and we just ended up settling on it. But That's the idea. You're adding those strands so that way when you hit some helmet mods where the int and the int are close to being the correct tiers, you can attempt to Orb of Unraveling to upgrade to try to save yourself on cost of fossils. Gets very expensive. Do not recommend doing this item unless you're on a serious budget and you're thinking about pushing Valdos. I want to keep stressing Dark Monarch, very good, very cheap. Use it. I'm going to make a separate video probably on a budget version and it will be using this helmet. Okay, moving on, the simplex craft. Check out my YouTube. I have a whole video about the simplex craft method. It's an Awakener Orb Beastcraft method where you're basically checking for the third outcome to be damage per int for like an instacker amulet. In this case, I was literally making an amulet for an instack build, and then I hit this very rare outcome, which is +2 all, and it's the whole reason I decided to make an anime weapon build. That being said, the +2 all, I gotta be honest, does not really make that much of a difference. If you just hit T1% ES, that would probably be comparable power-wise, and late game of this character, I may even be swapping to the percent int instead of the +2 all, so do not stress about getting +2 all. You can just go for percent ES. That would be a very good option as well if you're making a simplex for the build, or you could even use an Eyes of the Great Wolf with percent attributes and global defense. That would be good too. Next up for the shield. This is a +1 support shield with +2 crafted support. The whole reason is to enable Energy Blade. If you're doing the Energy Blade setup, the levels on your enhance give you a less multiplier on the Energy Blade. I'll just showcase this real quick how much quality makes a difference. If I were to just put Energy Blade on right now, I'd go to 21,000, right? What happens if I put on enhance with a bunch of plus support gems? All of a sudden we go to 26,000. It's a very, very big difference because if you look at the quality here, the quality gives a more ES multiplier, and the difference between adding a bunch of levels onto enhance and not is the difference in this saying 45% less ES and 33% less ES. The whole reason for the plus support gems is just to scale up that number, and that's what it's for. If you're doing Ephemeral Edge, you just want a different rare shield with just like Recover on Block or some other ES mods. You don't necessarily need the plus supports unless you're going for E-Blade, which is for damage, Ephemeral Edge for tank. Now, as for crafting the shield as a whole, this is mostly just a dense fossil spam, looking for high tier ES, or you can even do a woe essence spam. This shield itself has woe essence on it, and you're just looking for some high ES to craft +2 supports with it. All right, next up, we have the boot craft. Bootcraft is me getting super min-maxy with tank, going for the stationary damage reduction mod. Don't do this unless you're trying to hit high tank threshold. You can just go int plus abyssal socket plus a res, which would be hollow fossil, sanctified, fundamental would probably be the approach I would take. If you are trying to super min-max for the DR, the combination I used was hollow fossil, glyphic, which gives you the ability to hit special essence mods. And then I think I did Fundamental Sanctified. I think I did a 4 mod like that is what I believe I did. And I also did this in a situation where I added strands to the boots first before I made it rare. So that way, if I hit a lower tier int, I could upgrade it. I hit T2 int and I was able to upgrade it. And that's how we got to T1 int. Very rough expense to do the boots if you're trying to add the reduced stationary mod. It gets a lot more affordable if you're just trying to hit int plus some res plus the abyssal socket. As for the belt craft, we are doing Elder plus Crusader. The reason for Elder plus Crusader is late game, I would like to add percent ES prefix, which is a Crusader mod, which will require prefix crafting. I didn't do that yet. To start off with, I was just trying to get int plus attributes. If you're wondering, Lance, can I use a Mage Blood? The answer is yes. If you want to use a Mage Blood, absolutely you can use it. It'll give you more quality of life. Your character can run around faster, and it'll give you a bit more tank. Unfortunately, the thing I noticed when I was looking at this character as a minion build, the flasks from Mage Blood really cannot give offensive value. It's not like you can add an Onslaught flask and all of a sudden your minions start attacking 40% faster. They don't benefit from the flasks, only you do. So you can either use this to scale your ES higher, or you can use a Mage Blood if you want to go more quality life. Just as a reference point, I'm going to take off this belt to give you a look at how much a difference it makes in terms of ES. If I had a Mage Blood with percent int, it would probably be closer to like 39,000. So it's about a 10% more EHP, 10% more minion damage versus just raw quality life of zooming around. You can make that choice for yourself. Next up, we have the gloves. This is a dense fossil spam. And again, I would recommend using strands because if you hit some T2, T3 mods, you can attempt to upgrade them. that's the sort of idea here. And then previous crafting, you can just do block, slam, slam until you're satisfied. I hit a decent res with a mid-tier int, and I said, that's good enough for now. I'm going to keep. Now, that covers most of the gear slots out here. As for the gear slot right here, Kraken Jack, this is our mirror tier item we made for the Frost character a while back, and it's still alive. It is up for free mirror service if you want to mirror it. But if you're trying to be on more of a budget, which I imagine a lot of you are, I would recommend doing probably an approach where you do dense fossils, just trying to hit a good ES chest piece. I would do a non-influence chest piece where you go for like the less damage per int mod plus like block or some other aura effect, something like that, and then go for just int plus bench crafted percent attribute plus res. That'll save you a ton of money. It'll cut out a whole bunch of your ES scaling, but trying to hit an influence percent int, percent attribute int plus good ES is just really not super feasible on a budget, I would say, at all. All right, so that covers the chest piece. The last and final and most important piece for the character, I would say, is reflected helical. And this is also going to be one of the more expensive pieces. And why do I think this is so important for the build? It's because the line that says minion movement speed 94%. These animate weapons, they have okay speed at base. It's not great, but the part where the build becomes like very feels good and like feels kind of epic is when these animate weapons just zip around so fast. And so what I would recommend is going for a 2-stat with int and minion movement speed on a reflected mistcraft. And for an in-depth guide on how to do helical ring craft, check out my Gagarf comprehensive guide video and just skip to the timestamp where I go over helical rings. It's a really long explanation, but it goes over the details in depth to give you your best odds of how to do these crafts. And I don't want to re-explain them here because it would just make the video twice as long. So yeah, that goes over the gear pieces. I plan to do a more budget version of the build, and that will hopefully be in the next day or two here for those curious, because I think it can perform pretty well on a budget, and I would like to showcase that. So anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed looking at this character. I didn't really go over everything in super great detail, but for the people that are asking about what's the rough idea of the character, Mercenary, AG, hopefully that covers it. As always, thanks for watching Exiles. Take care and peace out. Have a good one.